The night sky over Montana broke open with light. A streak of blue-white fire cut across the stars, ending in a thunderous crash that shook the ground for miles. James Reeves stood on his porch, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, watching as the object carved a smoking trail through his wheat field. "Eleanor," he called back into the house. Something just crashed in the south field. By the time James and Eleanor reached the impact site, the metal of the strange craft had cooled from white-hot to a dull purple glow. It wasn't large, maybe the size of their pickup truck, but its design was clearly not of Earth. Smooth curves and strange symbols covered its surface, and despite the violent landing, it remained largely intact. "Should we call someone?" Eleanor whispered, her hand gripping her husband's arm. James shook his head slowly. "Let's see what it is first." As if responding to their voices, a seam appeared in the craft's hull. With a soft hiss, a section slid open, revealing a padded chamber bathed in gentle blue light. Inside lay two figures. The larger one was clearly mechanical, a robot of some kind, its metal body dented and sparking. But next to it, nestled in what looked like a cushion pod, was a tiny infant. The baby looked almost human, except for her violet eyes that seemed to glow in the dark, and the faint luminescence of her skin. She wasn't crying, just staring up at them, with an expression that seemed too aware for a newborn. The damaged robot jerked suddenly, its lights flickering. A voice emerged, speaking in a language neither human had ever heard. Then, as if realizing the problem, it switched to halting English. "Protect, child. Rejected. Imperfect. Death. Awaited. Guardian. Chose mercy." Eleanor instinctively reached for the baby, lifting her gently from the pod. "What do you mean? Who would reject a baby?" The robot's lights pulsed weakly. "Lord Thax. Viridian Imperium. Daughter failed genetic. Standards. I could not. Destroy. Primitive world. May accept. Flaws." James knelt beside the dying machine. "You brought her here to save her?" "Yes." "Name?" "Lyra." "Protect from?" "Father. He will. Kill, if finds." With those words, the robot's lights faded completely. The baby, Lyra, made a soft cooing sound in Eleanor's arms. "We can't give her to the authorities," Eleanor said firmly. "You heard what it said. She needs protection." James nodded slowly. "Let's get her home before anyone else sees the crash." They hadn't made it halfway back to their house when government vehicles began to arrive. Men in dark suits and military uniforms cordoned off the crash site within hours. When they came knocking on the Reeds' door the next morning, James and Eleanor had already made their decision. "We found her abandoned," James told the stern-faced agent. "We're keeping her." What followed was 2 years of legal battles. Scientists wanted to study Lyra. Military officials argued she posed a potential threat. Foreign governments demanded access to her, but the Reeds fought with everything they had, selling part of their farm to pay for lawyers who argued that no law existed covering the adoption of extraterrestrial orphans. Public opinion turned in their favor when footage leaked of Lyra playing with building blocks, looking like any other toddler except for her unusual features. She was just a child, people said. A child who needed a home. Finally, a judge ruled that until proven otherwise, Lyra would be considered a sentient being with rights, and the Reeds' adoption could proceed. The government would maintain some oversight, but Lyra would be raised as their daughter. On the night after the final court decision, Eleanor tucked Lyra into bed in her new permanent room, decorated with stars and moons. "You're home now," she whispered, stroking the child's luminescent cheek. "Forever." "Home," Lyra repeated, one of her first English words. Outside their farmhouse, the wheat field had already grown back over the spot where the pod had crashed. But buried beneath the soil, the alien craft still held secrets, data about Lyra's true heritage and the advanced civilization that had cast her away. Secrets that would one day reshape humanity's place in the universe. all because two people chose love over fear when they found a child from the stars. 10 years passed since the night that changed the Reed family forever. Lyra sat at her desk, pencil moving across paper with perfect precision as she solved complex equations that would challenge college students. Her violet eyes glowed slightly in concentration, a trait that intensified whenever she focused deeply. "Time for dinner, Lyra," Eleanor called from downstairs. Lyra set down her pencil and sighed. School had been difficult again today. The other fifth graders kept their distance, whispering "alien freak" when teachers weren't listening. She didn't cry anymore when it happened. She was used to it now. At the dinner table, James noticed his daughter's quiet mood. "Tough day?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, pushing mashed potatoes around her plate. "Mrs. Wilson made me stop answering questions again. She said I need to give other kids a chance." Eleanor and James exchanged looks. Lyra's intelligence had become impossible to hide. She could memorize entire books after reading them once. She learned languages in weeks instead of years. When she fell from a tree last summer, the deep cut on her arm had nearly healed overnight. "I had to pretend I didn't know the answer to some math problems today," Lyra continued. "But then I got bored and solved a different problem in my notebook. The teacher saw it, and now she wants to talk to you both." James reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out, kiddo. We always do." That night, as they did every year on the anniversary of finding Lyra, the family drove out to the spot where the pod had crashed. It had become their private ritual. The government had long ago removed the craft, but they'd missed some small pieces buried deep in the soil. Each year, Lyra would close her eyes and somehow know exactly where to dig to find another tiny fragment. "I found something bigger this time," Lyra said, brushing dirt from a metal object the size of her palm. It was covered in symbols like those on the original pod. When she touched it, the object glowed briefly, responding to something in her biology. Suddenly, Lyra gasped and dropped it. "What's wrong?" Eleanor rushed to her side. "It showed me something." "In my head," Lyra whispered. "A place with tall buildings that looked like crystals. People who looked like me, but taller with even brighter skin." That night, strange changes began. Lyra woke screaming, her skin burning hot. Small ridges appeared along her spine. Her violet eyes developed a second inner eyelid. For 3 terrifying days, she shifted between fever and lucidity as her body changed. When the transformation finally stopped, Lyra stared at her parents with new awareness. "I'm not human at all, am I?" she asked quietly. "The fragments I've been finding, they're triggering something inside me." Eleanor and James realized they couldn't hide the truth any longer. They showed her the secret files they'd been given after the court case. Translations of the data recovered from her pod, explaining who she really was. "Your biological father is Lord Thax of the Viridian Imperium," James explained gently. "He rejected you because you didn't meet their genetic standards. The robot who brought you here was programmed to destroy you, but it chose to save you instead." Lyra sat in silence, absorbing this information. Then she looked up, her eyes glowing with newfound intensity. "He threw me away because I wasn't perfect?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Eleanor knelt beside her. "Yes, but his loss was our miracle. We chose you, Lyra. We fought for you." Lyra stood suddenly, her back straight. "Then I'll make sure he regrets his choice someday. Not for revenge, but to show him what he missed by not seeing my worth." That night marked a turning point. Lyra stopped hiding her abilities. She embraced both her human upbringing and her alien heritage. She convinced her parents to let her skip grades, completing high school by 15. The girl who was abandoned by an alien lord began building something neither her biological father nor her adoptive parents could have imagined. A bridge between two worlds that would one day make her name echo across the stars, not as the discarded daughter of a distant tyrant, but as a legend of her own making. The massive view screen in Mission Control displayed the approaching spacecraft. After decades of sending signals into the void, humanity had finally received an answer. The first confirmed alien vessel was entering Earth orbit, and the world held its breath. At 20 years old, Lyra Reed stood among the assembled diplomats and scientists, her unique biology making her both the most and least qualified person in the room. Her violet eyes tracked the ship's movement with a strange sense of familiarity, though she had never seen such a craft before. "It doesn't match Viridian design," she whispered to Dr. Martin, her mentor at the Extraterrestrial Studies Institute. "The whole configuration is completely different." The older scientist nodded. "How can you tell?" Lyra touched the small metal fragment she always wore on a chain around her neck, the largest piece recovered from her arrival pod. "I just know." When the alien delegation emerged from their landing shuttle at the United Nations, the assembled human representatives gasped. The visitors, calling themselves the Araxian delegation of the Galactic Consortium, stood nearly 7 feet tall with blue-tinged skin and elaborate cranial ridges. They looked nothing like Lyra or the images she had glimpsed in her recovered memories. "We greet Earth as potential friends," the lead alien announced through a translation device. "We represent the consortium of 43 spacefaring species seeking peaceful exchange." During the formal introductions, the Araxian ambassador paused when reaching Lyra. His eyes widened slightly, head tilting in curiosity. "Your biology is unexpected," he said. "You are not fully human." A murmur ran through both delegations. Most of the world knew about Lyra's story, but her presence at this historic meeting had been debated extensively. Some feared it might confuse the first contact situation. Lyra stepped forward confidently. "I was born to the Viridian people but raised by humans. I consider Earth my home." The ambassador's expression shifted to what might have been surprise. "Viridian? We have heard rumors of such a species, but they do not join the consortium. They keep to themselves in the outer reaches. Fascinating that one of their kind is here." That exchange changed everything. Rather than being a liability, Lyra became central to the negotiations. The aliens were intrigued by her unique perspective, seeing her as proof that humans could successfully integrate with galactic society. In the weeks that followed, Lyra's intuitive understanding of non-human psychology proved invaluable. She noticed subtle body language the human diplomats missed. She understood concepts the aliens presented that others struggled to grasp. Her mind worked differently, not just smarter, but fundamentally alien in its approach while remaining deeply human in its values. "You possess a remarkable gift," the Araxian ambassador told her privately after a particularly difficult negotiation session. "You bridge worlds naturally. Many species never achieve what you do without effort." Lyra smiled. "I've had practice. I've been bridging worlds my entire life." When the consortium offered Earth provisional membership, a process that usually took decades compressed into months, they requested one unusual condition. They wanted Lyra as part of Earth's permanent diplomatic team. The night before she would depart Earth for the consortium's central hub, Lyra sat with her parents on their Montana porch, watching the stars as they had countless times before. "Are you scared?" Eleanor asked, wrapping an arm around her daughter. Lyra shook her head. "Excited, mostly, but I'll miss you both terribly." James looked up at the stars, now knowing some held worlds that would soon welcome his daughter. "Your story is just beginning, Lyra. The robot that saved you could never have imagined this." "I think about that a lot," Lyra said quietly. One act of mercy changed everything. One choice to see value where others saw flaws. As Earth prepared to join the galactic community, rumors about the unusual human ambassador spread across consortium space. Stories of the abandoned Viridian princess raised by primitives who had somehow produced a diplomatic prodigy. Most dismissed these as exaggerations, but soon species across the galaxy would learn the truth. And somewhere in the distant outer reaches, in the crystal spires of the Viridian Imperium, word was already reaching Lord Thax about a young diplomat with violet eyes who bore an uncomfortable resemblance to his house. a daughter he had ordered destroyed 20 years ago. A mistake that was about to return to haunt him. The Grand Hall of Earth's new consortium embassy sparkled with light reflected from 1,000 floating crystal orbs. Delegates from 20 alien civilizations mingled with human diplomats to celebrate Earth's official acceptance into the galactic community. At the center of it all stood Lyra, now the youngest senior ambassador in Earth's diplomatic corps. To unity across the stars, Lyra raised her glass in a toast, her violet eyes glowing with pride. 3 years of working within the consortium had transformed her from an oddity into a respected voice. Her unique ability to bridge different species' thinking had helped Earth navigate complex treaties that would have taken decades otherwise. Ambassador Trell of the Araxians approached her after the toast. "Most impressive, Ambassador Lyra. Your speech touched even the Dorsic delegation, and they rarely show emotion." Lyra smiled. "Thank you." A sharp pain cut through her words as her enhanced senses detected something wrong in the air. She smelled a faint trace of chemicals that shouldn't be there. "Everyone down," she shouted, pushing the Araxian ambassador to the floor just as the first explosion rocked the hall. 3 more blasts followed in quick succession. Through the smoke and chaos, Lyra glimpsed figures moving with military precision. They weren't targeting the crowd randomly. They were coming directly for her. Captain Blake, her human security officer, fired at the attackers. "Ambassador, this way." As they rushed toward the emergency exit, Lyra saw one attacker clearly for the first time. Tall, with luminescent skin and violet eyes like her own, but with the distinctive ridge patterns of pure Viridian genetics. "They're Viridians," she gasped. The attacker raised a weapon Lyra had never seen before, but somehow recognized instinctively. A genetic disruptor designed to target specific DNA. Her DNA. The beam struck her before Blake could pull her to safety. Pain unlike anything Lyra had ever experienced tore through her body as the weapon attacked the Viridian parts of her genetic code. She collapsed, blood pouring from her nose and ears. Through fading consciousness, she heard Blake's weapon fire and the attacker fall. Then darkness took her. Lyra woke in a military hospital 3 days later. General Harris of Earth Defense stood at her bedside, his face grim. "You survived something designed to be unsurvivable," he said without preamble. "The weapon was calibrated to destroy Viridian DNA. Your human adaptations saved you." Lyra tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. The others. 12 dead, including 2 alien delegates. The consortium is in an uproar. The attackers were definitely Viridian special forces. We captured one alive. Her hands trembled. "My father sent them." "We believe so." The Viridian Empire denies all involvement, claiming the attackers were rogue agents, but the prisoners' neural implants self-destructed before we could get information. Lyra stared at the ceiling, processing this new reality. The father who had ordered her death as an infant had discovered she still lived, and had tried again to erase his mistake. "Earth is considering a declaration of war," the general continued. "The consortium is divided. The Viridians aren't members, but they're powerful. Many worlds fear them." Lyra closed her eyes, making a decision that would change everything. "Help me up. You're not healed. I need to make a broadcast. Now, before Earth does something that gets millions killed." Hours later, still weak and connected to medical devices, Lyra faced cameras broadcasting to Earth and across consortium space. Her luminescent skin was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "I am Lyra Reed, daughter of Earth and child of Viridian blood," she began. "Today I speak to all worlds, including the one that twice tried to destroy me." She revealed everything: her abandonment, her rescue by a compassionate robot, her human family. She spoke directly to camera as if addressing Lord Thax himself. "To the father who rejected me, your assassins failed. The flawed child you discarded has become stronger through human love than perfect Viridian genetics could ever make her. I don't seek vengeance. I seek peace." She turned to address her human audience. And to Earth, we must not start a war. Violence answers nothing. I am living proof that different worlds can come together in harmony. As her broadcast reached across the galaxy, reactions varied from world to world. On Earth, people gathered in streets carrying signs. We stand with Lyra. In the Consortium hub, species debated what this conflict meant for galactic stability. And in a crystal tower on the distant Viridian homeworld, Emperor Thax, once a mere lord, watched the face of the daughter he had tried twice to erase, now defiantly spreading a message that threatened everything he had built. Lyra's broadcast changed everything. Within hours, the video had been viewed by billions across Earth. The sight of their wounded ambassador, a woman raised as human but born of the stars, speaking of peace while recovering from an assassination attempt, sparked something unprecedented. In New York, 10,000 people formed a human chain around the Consortium embassy. In Tokyo, artists projected Lyra's image on skyscrapers with the words "Earth's daughter" beneath. In Lagos, children released violet balloons into the sky as a symbol of solidarity. But most remarkable was what happened next. "We're getting reports from everywhere," General Harris told Lyra as she reviewed security updates from her hospital bed. "Ordinary citizens are organizing protection networks. They're watching for Viridian infiltrators." Lyra scrolled through the reports in amazement. Truck drivers were coordinating to report suspicious vehicles near government facilities. Amateur astronomers had formed a volunteer early warning system, scanning the skies for unidentified craft. Computer programmers created an emergency alert app that gained 50 million users in 3 days. I never expected this," Lyra whispered. Dr. Keller, her physician, adjusted her medication. "You united humanity by reminding us what we stand for, caring for our own, regardless of where they came from." The Consortium representatives were equally surprised. Ambassador Trell visited her recovery room, his blue skin flushed with excitement. "In our 5,000 years of interspecies relations, we've never seen anything like this," he said. "Most worlds rely solely on military and official channels for protection. Your humans are remarkable in their unity." Lyra smiled weakly. "We're stubborn that way." 2 weeks after the attack, intelligence detected a Viridian stealth ship entering Earth's atmosphere. Before military forces could respond, something unexpected happened. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Captain Blake burst into Lyra's room, turning on the view screen. News footage showed a Viridian assassin team being surrounded, not by soldiers, but by ordinary people. A truck driver had spotted their landing craft and alerted others through the new civilian network. Farmers, shop owners, and office workers had formed a perimeter, using their vehicles to block escape routes until authorities arrived. Not a single shot was fired. The Viridians, trained to fight military opposition, had no protocol for handling determined civilian resistance on such a scale. "The people got them," Blake said, disbelief in his voice. "Regular people." Lyra watched the footage of the captured assassins, their superior expressions now confused as they were surrounded by humans of all ages and backgrounds. "They don't understand," she said softly. "Viridians are raised to believe in hierarchy and perfect order. The idea of ordinary citizens organizing themselves is incomprehensible to them." The Consortium Security Council called an emergency session. Lyra, still recovering but determined to appear strong, attended via hologram. Representatives from 43 worlds debated how to respond to the Viridian aggression. "The Viridian Empire denies all knowledge of these attacks," the Consortium moderator announced. "They claim these are rogue elements, acting without official sanction." Lyra activated her microphone. "With respect, that's a lie. The neural implants, the genetic disruptors, these are Royal Guard technologies. I recognize them from my genetic memory." The council chamber fell silent. "What's most significant," she continued, "is how Earth has responded, not just with military might, but with the unified will of ordinary citizens. This is humanity's true strength." Ambassador Trull stood. The Oraxian delegation moves to upgrade Earth's status from provisional to full member of the consortium, with expanded protections and technology-sharing privileges. One by one, other delegations supported the motion. By the end of the session, Earth had achieved in weeks what normally took centuries: recognition as a major galactic power. That evening, as Lyra watched the sun set from her hospital window, her secure communicator chimed with a message from her parents in Montana. "We're so proud of you," her mother's voice came through. "The whole town is wearing violet ribbons. Your father installed a new security system. Says he's doing his part." Lyra smiled through tears. "I'll be home soon," she promised, "once I'm stronger." But she knew a greater confrontation was coming. The Viridians wouldn't stop. Her father, the Emperor, couldn't allow her to exist. The captured assassins were just the beginning. Earth had shown its heart. Soon, it would need to show its strength. The alarm sounded at 3:17 a.m. Earth time. Lyra woke instantly, her recovery now complete after 6 weeks of healing. "Ambassador," Captain Blake's voice came through the communication system. "Multiple Viridian warships have entered the solar system. They're not responding to hails." Lyra dressed quickly, her mind racing. "How many?" "7 capital ships and numerous support vessels. They're taking position near Mars orbit." Within an hour, Lyra stood in Earth's Defense Command Center alongside military leaders and government officials. The massive view screen showed the Viridian fleet, sleek, crystalline ships that seemed to glow from within. "They've sent a message," General Harris said grimly. "They demand we surrender the Viridian genetic material illegally harbored on Earth." "They mean you, Ambassador." Lyra stared at the ships. "What are our defensive options?" The room grew quiet. Earth had received some consortium technology, but nothing that could match Viridian warships. Their weapons could glass entire continents. "The consortium has been notified," someone offered, "but their nearest fleet is 3 days away." Lyra made a decision. "I need to go to Montana. Now." 4 hours later, Lyra stood in the field where her pod had crashed 20 years ago. With her were her parents, a small team of Earth's top scientists, and several large excavation machines. "It's still here," Lyra said, pointing to a spot that looked like ordinary soil. "My pod's central core." The government recovery team missed it. James Reed put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "How do you know?" "It's called to me my whole life. I've always felt it. The fragments I found each year were just pieces that worked their way to the surface." The excavation revealed a spherical object the size of a basketball, covered in Viridian symbols. When Lyra touched it, the sphere hummed to life, projecting holographic data. "It's a complete database," she explained as scientists carefully transported it to a mobile lab. "Not just my genetic information, but Viridian technology, schematics, weaknesses." Dr. Wilson, Earth's leading physicist, looked up from the initial scans. "This includes plans for their shield technology. If we can understand it, we might be able to neutralize their weapons," Lyra finished. For 3 days, as the Viridian fleet maintained its position, Lyra worked with Earth scientists around the clock. Her unique mind could interpret the alien data in ways the humans couldn't, while their innovative thinking approached problems from angles no Viridian would consider. "It's ready," Lyra announced just as the Viridian fleet began to move toward Earth. "The countermeasure isn't perfect, but it should disrupt their primary weapons." Satellite dishes and radio telescopes around the world were quickly modified with the new technology. As the Viridian ships entered striking range, Earth activated the system. The effect was immediate. The crystalline ships flickered, their engines sputtering as the countermeasure created resonance patterns that interfered with their energy systems. "They're hailing us," General Harris announced. The view screen lit up, and for the first time, Lyra saw her biological father's face. Emperor Thax of the Viridian Imperium looked similar to her, but with sharper features and cold, calculating eyes. He wore an elaborate crystal crown that amplified the natural luminescence of his skin. I speak to the creature bearing unauthorized Viridian genetic material, he said, his voice precise and emotionless. Lyra stepped forward. I am Ambassador Lyra Reed of Earth, the daughter you abandoned. A flicker of displeasure crossed his face. A mistake was made. The Guardian droid malfunctioned. You were meant for termination due to genetic irregularities. Those irregularities saved me from your assassins, Lyra replied calmly. Thax's expression shifted to something resembling respect. Impressive. Our weapons are temporarily compromised. Perhaps I misjudged your value. His voice became silky. Come home, daughter. Your place is with your true people. Help us bring these primitives into the Imperium as a subject world, and all will be forgiven. Lyra's violet eyes flashed with anger. Earth is my home. Humans are my people. They saw value where you saw flaws. They raised me with love where you ordered my death. She stepped closer to the screen. You have two choices, Emperor. Leave this system and never return, or face not only Earth's resistance, but the full response of the Consortium, which now counts humanity among its most valued members. The command center held its breath as Emperor Thax stared at his daughter, measuring her resolve against his pride. Finally, he spoke. The Imperium will withdraw. But this matter is not settled. As the Viridian ships retreated, chased by their malfunctioning systems, humans around the world celebrated. Lyra had faced down the father who abandoned her and protected the world that had embraced her. But in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. The great hall of the Consortium Central Hub fell silent as Lyra Reed walked toward the speaker's platform. 10 years had passed since the Viridian confrontation, years that had transformed both Earth and its most famous ambassador. Lyra's steps were confident, her violet eyes bright with purpose. At 35, she had grown into her power fully, no longer the uncertain hybrid, but a woman who had helped reshape galactic politics. Representatives of the Consortium, she began, her voice carrying to all corners of the vast chamber. Today we celebrate not just Earth's 10th year of full membership, but a new era of cooperation. The assembled delegates, representing now 67 spacefaring civilizations, watched attentively. Earth had risen quickly from newcomer to major power, largely due to the innovations Lyra had helped pioneer. The human Araxian defense network is now complete, she continued. For the first time, 30 worlds stand united under a single shield. What began as Earth's response to the Viridian threat has become the foundation for true galactic security. Ambassador Trell, now Supreme Consul of the Araxians, nodded in approval. Earth's defensive technology, born from Lyra's pod data and human ingenuity, had spread throughout friendly worlds. The very countermeasure created to stop Viridian weapons had evolved into the most advanced protection system in known space. After the ceremony, Lyra returned to her private chambers where a special communication waited. Her parents' faces appeared on the screen, older now but still beaming with pride. We watched the broadcast, Eleanor said. The whole town gathered in the square to see it. James chuckled. The mayor declared it Lyra Reed Day in Montana. There were purple fireworks. Lyra laughed, her heart full. Despite her duties keeping her off-world most of the time, she had never forgotten where she came from. The Reed farm had become something of a pilgrimage site, with a small museum telling the story of the alien child raised by human love. Her communication device chimed with a priority alert. I have to go, she told her parents. I love you both. The alert carried unexpected news. The Viridian Empire, once the most isolated power in the galaxy, was in chaos. Reports indicated civil unrest had erupted on multiple worlds. Hours later, Lyra sat with the Consortium Security Council reviewing footage smuggled from Viridian space. Crowds filled the streets of the capital, many carrying symbols inspired by Earth, and most surprisingly, images of Lyra herself. They're calling it the imperfect revolution, explained Intelligence Director Chen. Your story has spread throughout the Empire. The idea that perceived flaws might actually be strengths has deeply resonated with the lower castes. Lyra watched in amazement as Viridians chanted her name. For a society built on genetic perfection, the success of a rejected hybrid had become a powerful symbol. 3 days later, a damaged Viridian diplomatic vessel entered consortium space under a flag of truce. The lone passenger requested an audience with Ambassador Reed. The Viridian who entered Lyra's office was thin and bore signs of recent injury. She bowed deeply. "I am Mira, once royal geneticist to Emperor Thax," she said. "I've come to tell you your father is dead. The revolution has succeeded. The genetic hierarchy is falling." Lyra showed no emotion at news of her father's death. "What happens now?" "The Provisional Council sent me to ask for your help. You are seen as the symbol of a new way." Mira hesitated. "Many wish for you to return and help rebuild." Lyra studied the Viridian carefully. "I won't abandon Earth or the consortium." "We don't ask you to. We ask for guidance, for a bridge between worlds, as you have always been." 1 month later, Lyra stood on the balcony of the former Imperial Palace, addressing a vast crowd of Viridians. Behind her stood representatives from Earth and the consortium, witnessing history. "I was rejected by the old order for being imperfect," she told them. "Yet those supposed imperfections allowed me to survive, to adapt, to build connections between different worlds. There is no such thing as perfect, only different ways of being strong." The crowd erupted in cheers as Lyra signed the treaty bringing the reformed Viridian Alliance into the consortium as its 68th member. That night, as celebrations continued across the planet, Lyra stood alone in what had once been Emperor Thax's private garden. She thought about the long journey from abandoned infant to galactic peacemaker, a simple robot's act of mercy, a human couple's decision to love a strange child, a girl determined to prove her worth, small choices that had changed the course of worlds. The story spread across 1,000 planets, the tale of the rejected princess whose flaws had saved her, raised by primitive humans who saw potential where others saw only failure. The alien lord had abandoned his daughter, but humanity had made her a legend that would endure among the stars for generations to come.